All right, I think that's good. Let's get started. So the title of my talk is Show Them What It Feels Like, how your approach to development changes with XR and these kind of new emerging technologies. This is me, Mark Strayer. I'm the engineering manager for research and development for Sam's Club. And I'm an engineer who also is a big passion for design. So I like to make up words because why work in tech if you can't make up words and assign what they mean? So I use design engineer or engineer. And I like to use those words with my wife, and she looks at me like I'm an insane person. But now I am representing as an industry expert, not a representative of Walmart or Sam's Club. The lawyers made me put this in here because nothing sets the tone like a legal disclaimer. You can read that real quick. Now that we've set the mood, let's check on our presentation stoke factor. You know, nothing increases a party like a legal disclaimer. I'm gonna go with we've increased our stoke by 50%, and we've reduced our legal risk by 100%, which was the most important part of this. So let's go ahead and get moving. So what's kind of the current state of XR? And really with all of these technologies, it's just possibilities. You know, tons of different ideas and things we can try. And, you know, I wave my hands at my team all the time, and there isn't a lot of, plowed road, ways of doing things, ways of figuring things out. It's actually difficult to even talk about amongst ourselves because of kind of a lack of context, because it isn't established yet. And so it can be really intimidating, right? You have an idea, you want to explain it, and you wave your hands, and someone looks at you, and you can just see they have not understood anything you just said. So then you make a video of it, and then you show them the video of it, and they still don't understand because you really have to feel it, you have to experience it. So we have to create this context. It doesn't exist. And so as we're inventing it, we can create little pieces and parts, and I'll get more into this in a minute, about how we can kind of create that context to increase our ability to communicate about what we're trying to do. So take an app, right? I can draw an app on a napkin, compare it to 3 or 4 other apps we all use every day, and your brain will just fill in the context, right? You'll almost have a perfect example inside your head of probably what that app's gonna do. An example would be here, where the CEO of Catrice and Horowitz is being pitched on the latest cat Uber Zonflix idea, right? You can just kind of wave your hand, show a drawing, and they'll understand exactly, although I would say that the CEO here is very unimpressed. So how do we break it down? We always ask lots of questions. And so we already have questions we already asked, right? Should we do this? Are we solving problems for our users? Is it compelling? Are we creating joy in our users? Oh, one thing I forgot to note, I do work at Sam's Club, so I will use the term user and member interchangeably, and it's not a store, it's a club. I'm referring to a store where I'm not talking about going to the bar. So, will this cause joy in our audience? Does this make sense? It makes sense for us, but we built it. Does it make sense to who we're trying to give this to? Those important design conversations like, what color should the icon be? Is there an ROI on this? Can we scale this idea? With XR, we add all kinds of really interesting and complex questions. How do we train our users to use this? Remember, no context. What happens when the user moves in relation to this experience? People move with an app, it goes with them wherever they go. When they're looking at an experience and they move, does it turn, does it rotate, does it stay in place? Do I care about occlusion? What is occlusion? Do I respect physics and gravity? In this type of technology, it's more like guidelines, it's not laws. You can do whatever you want. So what can you do with this infinite canvas? And what should you do with this infinite canvas? So these are all really complex, hard questions that we just kind of have to break down and try things. And the most important question lately is, should I figure out how to use Gen AI so I can get more budget? The answer is probably. It's good to throw that in there. But we've seen this pattern before. If you think back of other kind of tectonic shifts in technology, we've kind of seen this. So the internet to do business, in the 90s, this was unbelievably complex and difficult and just an insane idea. Who's this Bezos guy who has like stacks of books in his house? But the 90s were rad. This is a screenshot. There's an amazing website, if you've never seen it, called the Wayback Machine. They have time-stamped screenshots of websites going all the way back to the 90s. This is 1997, and this is the Sam's Club website. Unfortunately, as much as I would want that virtual reality button to work, so I could see what that was. Unfortunately, it does not work. But This was state of the art. I had to get a video of it because, I mean, this is some amazing stuff here. Spinning graphics. Do you know how long some designers spent cutting those people out and what Photoshop was in '97? I mean, that was a super difficult thing to do. And, you know, shout out to those models, by the way. They're super stoked in those pictures. But then we saw the same thing with mobile, right? The devices came out and there was all kinds of crazy split keyboards, rotating things. We're actually kind of coming back to a little bit with the foldable phones. You know, iOS, famous for their skeuomorphic, make everything look like the real thing. Yellow legal notepads, a newsstand, this microphone with that view meter. And I was not immune to this influence. This is an app, my first app that we created and put in the store. It was meant to monitor your websites. We were so stoked with the brushed metal look, the embedded icons, and then that ping button with that wood texture around it. Oh, we're so happy with that at the time. So what's the process for this? So sometimes when you're trying to come up with a way to explain something, the internet just hands you something. And so I subscribed to cocky.org, and he actually had a thing about this t-shirt that he was putting out, and it has this graphic. I'm like, what is this graphic? And this graphic is called the process, also known as the design squiggle. And it's basically describing what it's like when there's this new thing or a new design or new problem you're taking on. And this is the process that your solutions take. And you'll notice it's not just kind of back and forth and eventually settles out. It's back and forth. It goes back to the beginning. You start over. It feels like chaos, but eventually it starts to kind of settle down and you kind of have a direction. For XR, VR, all of these kind of tech, we are way to the left. You know, there is no agreed upon design language. Everybody's kind of trying their own thing for what works for them. But why is it like this? Well, it's kind of like complexity. And a thing that dawned on me when I was teaching my son how to drive is that if you've driven for 20 years, you get in your car and you drive. It is one task. When you start, it's 1,000 tasks. I have to get my seatbelt. I have to look, okay, the mirror's set. Okay, I got to put it in drive. I have to watch here. I got to watch my rear view. You know, there's all these tasks and you're just cycling through them over and over and it's like scary and complex. But over time, it just becomes driving. We're in that early stage right now. There's 1,000 things you're constantly deciding all the time. But eventually it'll just be the XR, just like apps are, just like the web was. And so without that context, with the complexity, it's so hard to communicate amongst ourselves with our users. And so we're going to continue to invent that context a little bit at a time. And so break it down into small pieces and then make a POC that is just a throwaway for that piece. Right? Tweak that design, get it in front of people, put it on their face, show them how it feels. And by build, I don't mean build in the thing, even in the thing that you're going to want to scale with, right? Those platforms, you know, there's a lot of weight that comes with those. So build it in something small and quick so that you can get it in front of somebody, hack and bodge your way so that your users can react and give you that all-important feedback. And then iterate on that piece until that piece feels right, and then add that piece to the context of your discussion that you're talking about, and then keep doing that over and over again. A pro tip is find a partner who knows more about XR than you do. That's what I did. I found a group that had a ton of experience with XR, but up front it was very clear. You know, I'm not looking for this group or consultancy to be my crutch or my company's crutch forever. It's like, I want to learn from you. Your job is to teach us about this. And from that, they also wanted to learn about our business. And that partnership, if you can find it, is a key enabler to getting into this space. So how do we supercharge this process? And so we actually have kind of two concurrent design squiggles. We have that user experience testing, you know, with the UX of the context of, does video work in a UX type or a XR type situation? How much text is too much text? If we're going through a phone, it's weird to read at arm's length. So what are some ways to change that? You know, information density, does proximity make sense in this, you know, thing? And so by being able to test that, we're doing that kind of design squiggle around just the user experience. At the same time, what you would call your more traditional engineering is figuring out the spatial computing to support anything that the UX comes up with. You know, was doing the plumbing around, you know, what data sources do you need? All of those kind of standard things you need to scale anything, that's being done. The best part about kind of splitting that is that those parallel paths inform each other. Right, your UX team may uncover a fairly simple, from an engineering standpoint, solution that your members are crazy for, your users are really excited about, and you talk to your engineering team and they're like, oh, we can do that. We've been able to do that for a month. We've been working on this other much more complex solution. The reverse is true. Engineering can uncover an ability that then informs the UX process. But eventually those paths will kind of converge, right? So it's almost like two squiggles coming down to converge and individually, and then those come together. And now you almost kind of start a little bit back again to the left. You've combined those two concepts, and now you kind of do a little bit more andering, right? That's all together, but then that process should be a lot shorter. So an example, and this is not an XR example, this is an app example. I used to work for a company called Adana, and we built an iterative drawing app. And it's the most complex app I've ever worked on. And here's a quick video, and I'll describe what our process was for that and how we use that for XR. I turned off the very intense music that is associated with this, but as you can see here, there's a ton of gestures. On any given screen, there's at least 10 gesture recognizers running, each one attached to some sort of animation, and they can be touching the screen with their fingers and the pen that we produced. And so to create an app like this, each one of these little pieces and parts had to be really dialed in individually and then also combined together. And so how we did that, we created throwaway apps. We probably had 100 iOS apps that were just little pieces and parts that the designers would design, a couple of engineers would put together, and then they would take it to our intended audience and get their feel. And we threw away a lot of ideas. A side note on this, it's actually kind of super fun if you have these prototypes for the engineering team. In our culture, we let them name and design icons for all these little apps that we had. And so if you noticed in that video, there's a experience where you can take your drawing and put it up in the corners to kind of save it for later. We call that Hot Pockets. And so we made the app a little microwave. There was another example of a prototype that it was one of those ones where design would make a change. We would implement it, we'd put it in front of the members, wrong. We would design a new idea, make a change, take it in front of the people, just not there yet. And so it became known as the Dread Prototype Roberts, because if you're familiar with The Princess Bride, good work today, most likely kill it in the morning, was a very good example of how that one worked. And so before I summarize, do we have any questions? I think we do have one that was submitted, hang on. So through the app, someone asked, what challenges did Sam's Club encounter while integrating XR into its development strategy and how they were addressed? I think in a lot of ways, it's not even just, XR, it's any brand new thing, especially into an org of our size. There can be simple conversations that you think are going to be simple that are super difficult. I recently hired my first Unity dev, and when I went to HR to discuss it, I might as well have been asking for a neurosurgeon, right? They're like, what are you talking about? What is this person? I need to build 3D assets. I have a 20 email chain with finance trying to figure out where to put a 3D asset that I purchased as far as an asset that we own, right? And so there's a lot of that work, but even outside of that, working in R&D in a company of our size, and anybody who works for a decently sized company, there is an organizational design, right? The organization is designed to accomplish something. Typically that is maximize ROI and minimize risk. Well, in R&D, every word that comes out of my mouth sounds like risk. It's unproven, it's new, sounds crazy. I'm asking for people that might as well be a neurosurgeon. And so at first, it really bums you out when you realize this, right? Because you're like, well, it's basically designed to work against me. But actually, now you know what your adversary is. If you understand it, if you understand the goals or the reasons why those things are there, it puts you in a position of power to help negotiate those little carve-outs, right? Those little things that's like, yes, I know this is this way for a reason. A perfect example is we tend to make our prototypes fairly outside of the rest of any of the apps that are built. Well, why do we do that? Because when you are in that, you have security reviews, code reviews, testing coverage reviews, all of these other things that come across from that. We don't need that just to test a little idea. And so I work to create these little carve-out where it's like, no, it's okay, you can stay over here as long as you're not scaling this or sending us out to the App Store, things like that. So just understanding how what you're doing is that square peg trying to fit in a round hole and find ways to kind of sand those edges down so you can kind of meet in the middle a little bit. Any other questions? So to summarize, embrace that complexity and break things down to those small experiential pieces that you can really test and iterate on. But we've been here before. Look at that historical, the way things were. I mean, when my first .com startup, we legitimately had a server that was actually calling on a phone and faxing orders to the warehouse, and then someone would take it off the fax machine and fill the order. We had a bunch of orders back up, and it turned out it's because the guys in the warehouse were using the fax machine phone to make phone calls. So, I mean, the complexity has always been there. You just had to figure out how to handle it. Hack and bodge your way to that to get that experience and establish that context. And then parallelize your UX and your engineering research, putting them side by side. Don't make them wait for the next one. Do them at the same time because they can really inform each other, and it really does kind of supercharge the process.
I've got a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Over here. We hear a lot about ROI when it comes to XR, like what's the ROI of doing an intervention in XR, but I'm curious on your take of what's the value of engagement when it comes to XR? Like sometimes you can't put a dollar value on that, but do you have an opinion on XR when it comes to engagement of the experience?
So engagement with like just whoever's using it?
With the end user.
Yeah. Well, one, just a quick comment on ROI. One of the things our group tries to explain and talk ad nauseum at with the organization is our goal is to provide learnings to existing user experience teams so that, and that's very purposeful, right? Because I don't know if anybody's worked in innovation group in here, you kind of get to I don't like them. They get to work on shiny stuff, they've got cool toys, I walk by, it looks like they're playing video games. I don't like them because I'm solving bugs and they're working on cool stuff, right? And so how we're alleviating that, it's really worked, is we bring them in because we're gonna go out and we're gonna make all the mistakes, right? We're gonna run into all the problems and we're gonna tell you all about it the entire time. And then if we can find something that's worth scaling, it goes to you guys, it's not us. Take the credit, that's cool. But as far as like engagement, when we talk to our members with some of our, these early prototypes, I'm actually surprised at how engaged they are. Across demographics, you talk to somebody, there was a lovely older couple who go to Sam's to walk, right? It's a safe place that they can walk in the winter, it's not icy, it's cool in the summer. And so, we're just kind of riffing on ideas. And it's like, well, what if as a part of this experience, we could tell you how far you've walked, right? They're using an iPhone. I mean, it's got all that stuff built in. Really? Oh, that sounds awesome. And then we went into a big discussion about how their grandson plays video games and VR, and that was also awesome and informative. But like talking to that, I was actually surprised at, some of our business members, and they have different views. But again, that real-time information is really important to them because they're trying to get in, get what they need, and go do what their real business, where they make money is. Versus, you're kind of, there was one couple I thought was hilarious. They were like, we don't like being here. It's very stunning, right? You're like, okay, maybe there's a different problem. So I was like, no, we don't like shopping at all, both of us. We just want to get in and get out. So whatever this does, just make it so we can get in and get out. I'm like, okay, that's great, right? So we've actually had a really good luck with engagement. You kind of worry, right? You work so hard on this and you're gonna put them in front of them like, whatever, you're out of your mind, and then they walk away. We've actually had really good experience with that, getting people to engage and be excited about it.
Follow on to that, how did you do that? What questions did you ask, or how were you open to them, or what techniques did you use?
To have like the conversation, I got a researcher to help me because I'm smart enough to know that I bias all my questions, right? Because I'm excited about it. I'm like, check out this cool thing I make. Don't tell me it's bad because it's going to make me sad. Don't call my baby ugly, right? And so we have an amazing research team, and they were instrumental in, and I learned so much from just watching how they work, right? And how they approach it. Phenomenal things that I'm terrible at. I mean, remembering the member's name. It was amazing to me. She actually told me that she worked at a museum tour and it was a part of their job that they were supposed to learn. So think of just 15 people show up to a museum tour, you have to learn their name. So she told me some tricks that she could use to do that. So I highly recommend if you can get your hands on a researcher, it could greatly inform and impact your ability to do that without inadvertently kind of biasing all your things. Yeah.
Where do you see the areas of significant XR opportunity or emerging technologies having big potential?
Earlier, I forget who the speaker was talking about, don't worry about the future all the time, worry about what you can do right now. We're actually looking at a lot of, on phone XR, right? Because nobody's putting on a headset and walking through the club, right? I mean, there's obvious internal enterprise facing things that you would use headsets and things for, but I also think it's very important to learn using those phones, right? Eventually someone's gonna have the holy grail amazing glasses that go on your face that do everything the same thing as a headset, but you have to do the work to lead up to there. So actually there's a lot of compelling things you can do. I mean, the power in the latest iPhone is pretty unbelievable, right? The cores that are in there are just mind-blowing as far as processing power. So I actually think there's a lot of things that are going to start coming out for the handheld devices we already have. Did I answer your question? Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.